As you watch the second half of this program, keep these questions in mind.
How did George Washington's leadership help the colonists win the Revolutionary War?
How were the rebel tactics different from what the British had faced before? The rebel colonists were going up against one of the most dominating armies in the world, and they knew the Redcoats would not be forgiving. To succeed, they needed a leader who would help them face the British head-on. George Washington was their answer.
What makes someone a hero?
Superpowers?
Someone who puts other people before themselves.
Someone who's brave.
They must have a strong character. Strong, like mentally and physically.
Someone that other people can look up to.
Somebody who cares for other people without getting something back.
Someone who can make a difference in someone's life.
Does good in the world.
Someone who saves someone's life.
Not afraid to stand up for what they believe in.
By 1776, fighting between American colonists and British troops had already taken place, but Americans were divided over the dispute with Britain. Some colonists, called patriots, wanted complete independence from Britain. Others, known as loyalists, supported the British government and considered the patriots to be traitors. And many colonists had no strong feelings either way. However, public opinion began to shift with the publication of a pamphlet called Common Sense. In its 50 or so pages, author Thomas Paine criticized the idea of being ruled by a British monarch. Paine called on colonists to fight for American independence.
The sun never shined on a cause of greater worth. 'Tis not the concern of a day, a year, or an age. Posterity will be affected, even to the end of time.
Paine's words inspired widespread support for the Revolution. In July of 1776, the Continental Congress took a first step toward breaking away from Britain. The delegates voted to break with Britain. Then they approved the Declaration of Independence, which stated the reasons for independence. The document represented the commitment of the 13 colonies to continue the war against Britain until victory was achieved. But a long fight lay ahead to make independence a reality. George Washington led the American troops, who were known as the Continental Army. At first, the Continental Army suffered several defeats and had to retreat from New York. But on Christmas night 1776, Washington led 2,400 men across the icy Delaware River, surprising the British and gaining a victory. The real turning point came in the fall of 1777 at the Battle of Saratoga. There, the Americans forced a large British army to surrender. France, which wanted to weaken Britain, realized that America had a real chance of winning the war. It signed a treaty of alliance with the United States and sent soldiers and ships to help the Americans. But struggles remained. Washington and his army suffered a cruel winter in 1777 and 1778 in its camp at Valley Forge. The 11,000 Continental soldiers were hungry and cold and wore threadbare clothes. Many were sick with chills, fever, diarrhea, or worse, and provisions were scarce.
Men without clothes to cover their nakedness, without blankets to lay on, without shoes. Their marches might be traced by the blood from their feet marching through frost and snow.
Despite their hardships, Washington's troops used this period to train and become a more effective army. At the end of 1778, the British shifted their attention toward the South. Within weeks, Britain controlled South Carolina and set its sights on North Carolina. But Patriot fortunes improved as the Continental Army staged a comeback in the South. The final major battle took place in October 1781 at Yorktown, Virginia. American and French forces trapped a British army and left it only one option: surrender. A number of factors contributed to the American victory. Even the British would come to admit that George Washington's skilled leadership helped secure victory for the colonists. In addition, the French certainly helped the Americans defeat their enemy. Also, the British faced a difficult task. America was a large land, and they did not have the forces to control all of it. Finally, American victory would not have been possible without the patriotic spirit and passionate commitment of the soldiers. They were not prepared to give up, even though they bore great hardships. After the defeat at Yorktown, the British Parliament voted in favor of peace, and negotiations with the Americans began in 1782. In 1783, British and American officials signed the Treaty of Paris. With that act, Britain granted the independence of its one-time colonies. A new nation, the United States, was born.